Well, good evening. How you doing? It's just gone 9 p.m. Here in Port Stewart, Northern Ireland, where, like most other people, I'm staying at home. And every weekday evening at this time, I'm reading from my books. So I hope you enjoy a bit of nostalgia and a bit of crack from Belfast. Wherever you're watching this, it's lovely to see people from all over the world watching these videos of the different chapters of Paperboy. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy it this evening. And this evening's chapter is called chapter 12 of Paperboy, and it's called A Final Verbal Warning. I got complacent, so I did. Now that my paper bag was black with experience, I began to cut corners and take risks. I was heading for a fall as surely as the day I had slipped on Petra's poop, fallen against Mrs. Grant's rosebush, and torn my new tartan turnips out of John Fraser's. The same day I had run home crying and been spotted, of course, by Big Jaunty, who had told all the other paper boys the next day when they had all laughed until they cried. I had developed the sort of paperboy swagger that comes with the confidence of having delivered 10,000 papers with a completely clean disciplinary record. Among swaggers, the paperboy swagger was unique. It was more uncommon than a hard man swagger, more routine than a marching season swagger, and less intimidating than a tartan gang swagger. It was a swagger very much in its own right and involved walking purposefully while at the same time confidently swinging a heavy bag over one shoulder without losing your balance, no matter how high your platform shoes, whenever it swung back into place. Your shoulders would then continue an arrogant vertical and horizontal swaying motion, while one hand would remain fixed on the paper bag, holding it close to one leg. With your other hand, you would remove each newspaper from the paper bag, slapping it and folding it aggressively against the other leg. It was paperboy poetry in motion. This complex ballet of the streets could be performed at great speed, unless you were in a bad mood because you'd got the strap for your cheek and you weren't going to the caravan that weekend. I had mastered the essentials of the job long ago, as well as identifying and honouring the importance of all the more subtle do's and don'ts that were part of a paperboy's unwritten induction manual. These include the following immutable rules. Never throw newspapers towards a house like an American paperboy. This is Belfast. You could be mistaken for a petrol bomber. Also, the paper might well get soaked or stolen. Do not rub your nose while doing the papers, as the black ink on your hands will create a Groucho Marx moustache on your face at the exact moment that a wee girl you fancy or your big brother is walking down the street. They will laugh and you will be humiliated. Do not overfold your papers, or they will be too fat to fit through the standard letterbox. Do not attempt to deliver papers on a bike. The weight of your paper bag will inevitably shift your centre of gravity so that you lose balance and crash into a prickly hedge, a brick wall, a rusty car, or all three. Do not fight with spring-loaded letterboxes, except they will slice your fingers no matter how good your delivery technique. Never attempt to deliver to houses with snarling dogs, especially if the owner says, "Oh, don't worry, love, he wouldn't touch you." Do not be seen jumping over fences between semi-detached houses. This will upset the more upwardly mobile customer by reminding them that although they have risen from terrace to semi, they still live on the Shankill and as such have not yet achieved suburban detached status. Do keep ringing the doorbell if a curtain twitches and no one comes to the door, especially if they haven't paid their paper money for 2 weeks in a row. Do remember who is on holiday so they do not return from Malile to a newspaper mountain inside their front door. And finally, do be nice to old ladies, including pretending you like their cats that scratch you, and be friendly with families who have a Ford Cortina and wash it every week, as these are the ones who are most likely to give you a good tip. So those are some of the Paperboy rules. Before I continue, just want to say hello to see who's joined me this evening. Hello, Alan McLean. Good to have you along again. And Nigel McComb. Hi, Patrick who was fantastic as both Al Mac and Big Isabel, my granny, in the musical version of Paperboy at the Lyric Theatre. Mary Black, welcome again, Mary. Hello, Ali Bennett. Oh, and also hi, Zoe and Lucy. I forgot to give you a shout out the last time you asked me, Ali. Good to have you along again. Hi, Dee Smith and Andrea Trainer. Hello, Andy McCarroll, Mary Black. Hello, David Mars and Fiona Hawkins. See that? Two people come up instantly beside each other. We can't, we just stick together, us BRA ones. Hello, Gannon Reid. I'm going to knock the thing over. And Andrea Trainer. Hello, Michael McKinley Sr. Hi, Nigel from the scenic central coast of New South Wales. Oh, that sounds beautiful. Hello, Praise. Good to have you. Hi, Francis McGrath. Davy Dunwoody. The lovely Leslie from up the country, upstairs. The minute is here. Hi, Nave Collins and Etta in Macrofelt. Hi, Etta. Hi, Aline. I'm glad you're enjoying the. Hi, Roseanne. Long time no see. Hope you're doing okay. Hi, Donna Hunter. You'd love. Yes. Well, I think we'll be recruiting for those at some stage. We'll get underway. Hello, Ian Parsley. How you doing? Angela and Keith. Lovely to have you. Hi, Mark. And hi, Priya Son. And lovely Joy Weisner. So it's good to have you all listening in. And I'm going to continue the story from chapter 12 of Paperboy about my final verb warning. As my mastery of my trade became increasingly evident, I noticed how Al Mac began to look at me with a certain amount of awe. Clearly, he had never seen in a Paperboy. I was never late. Never once had I given him cheek. I had never stolen even a single penny. My employer's attitude to me changed from indifference to incredulity and then finally to admiration. I actually overheard him whispering the words, "Best fucking Paperboy ever," to Mrs. Mac once as I walked into the shop with a bulging bag of tepid takings fresh from my boots. And indeed, to Mrs. Mac, I was approaching sainthood. Her complaint rate was exceptionally low. My clean slate had in fact been marred on a few occasions only by unjust, crumpled back page complaints. And even then, Al Mac had taken responsibility for the damaged goods as being van related as opposed to bag related. Each time he had apologised to the customer and said it hadn't been the wee lad's fault and given them a free ulster. Even when customers sometimes complained unfairly when, for example, it had actually been the postman who had spat on their step, I never told any of them where they could stick their Belfast Telegraph. At least not out loud. Not even Mr. Black from number 13. And so the conflict had never escalated to management level, and therefore Al Mac never even got to hear about it. Of course, Mr. Black had never liked me. Since my very first paper round, when he had suggested I was too young for my vocation. The feeling was mutual. I didn't like that I'd get either. He was well known for being grumpy. My mother always described him as yet another ignorant wee Belfast man. I took this to mean that there was a large pool of such men in our city. Mr. Black's wife had died before I was born, and he had grown-up children in Canada and bad breath. He loved his greyhounds only. One day, while happily engaged in my work and delivering his paper perfectly and on time, with one of the greyhounds tugging at the turn-up of my parallels, the same Mr. Black told me off for whistling Fernando by ABBA. He said I should not be whistling no Republican song at his front door. There was a line in Fernando that went something like, "How proud you were to fight for freedom in this land." And so Protestants thought Fernando was a provo. I was certain, however, that Fernando, the song's hero, was fighting near the Rio Grande because that rhymed with land in the next line. ABBA spoke Swedish, so they liked easy English rhymes like that. I wasn't sure where the Rio Grande was, but I was certain it wasn't anywhere near West Belfast. I supposed it might have been in the Bogside. But even then, I was sure Fernando wasn't a provo. Mr. Black's attack about my song choice seemed particularly unjust, since I wasn't even singing the questionable words of the song on the day in question. I was only whistling the tune. Anyway, I was in no doubt that the blonde one in ABBA, in whom I was developing an increasingly strong interest at the time, was much too nice to be on the other side. And I had never seen a woman look less like Bernadette Devlin. I couldn't work out whether Agnetha was a Protestant name or a Catholic name, but maybe Swedish was a different religion altogether, so it would be okay to marry her. Although she was already married to Bjorn, which is a shame, of course, because that was forever. As my professional complacence grew, I began to leave the occasional gate open behind me. If I suspected a customer was at church or voting again, or if I otherwise judged they would not see my misdemeanour, I would wilfully leave their gate wide open. It felt good, dismissively, letting it swing in the wind. I was a rebel now. No gate would dominate me. Of course, if there were small dogs or children that might escape onto the road and get knocked down by a bus, I was still very careful. But in less dangerous circumstances, I would sometimes belligerently let customers' gates swing on their squeaky hinges. In the absence of witnesses, I would be only one of a range of suspects for the crime of gate left swinging, and I knew that with my reputation, I would be at the back of the criminal queue. It could have been the bread boy or the rag and bone man who shouted, "Any old rags," or a scout, "Bob a jobbin'," or a politician canvassing, or a Baptist giving out gospel tracts, or a collector for the loyalist prisoners. Any one of these would have made a better suspect than me. Yes, Christians, Boy Scouts, and Loyalists were all more potentially aberrant than I was. If it came to a line-up in Tennant Street RUC station, I was sure I wouldn't be the one to be singled out. My reputation was secure, and I knew that both Earl Mac and Mrs. Mac would defend my innocence to the hilt. Once the pair of them had established the extent of my integrity, they had become invested in maintaining their belief in it. I had become very smug. My family, the ones who knew me best, could recognise it only too well. "Don't be so Mr. Know-it-all, love," warned my mother. "Stop being such a cocky wee shite," ordered my father. "Pat yourself on, dickhead," chided my big brother. "Wise up, wee lad," said my wee brother. But these challenges occurred behind closed doors, and I was far from wising up. To my employers and customer base alike, I remained blameless. In my own mind, I was beyond reproach. But pride, as the Reverend Lowe would have said, always comes before a fall. So, before I tell you what happened next, let's see who else is with me. Hello, Karen Bickerstaff. Good to have you along. Also known as Sharon Burgess in real life. Lovely to have you along. I hope you're all staying well there, Karen. Hello, Joe Mascalino. Hi, Ann Kirk. Good to have you again. Hello, John Barry. And Jeremy Skillen, who's a brilliant supporter of the Paperboy musical and everything. Brenda, Linda Buchanan, and how are you in Bangor? Trinity Heavens, my good friend in Uganda. Good to have you, Trinity. Glad you're enjoying it, Karen. Hello, Celine Malloy and Amy Nolan in the States. Good to have you. Hope you're doing okay there, Amy. And Mona Trainer and Alison Martin. Lovely to have you all along. And it's great to have people from all over the world. We're all alone, but we're all together at the same time. I think that's a great feeling during these times. It happened on a Wednesday. The papers were lightest on a Monday and a Wednesday, so these were generally my most complacent days. Lost in my smugness, I barely gave my professional responsibilities a thought that day. Although it was a school day, I was excited. On Wednesdays, I had a violin lesson and I played guitar at the Bible Union at lunchtime, so it would be a very musical day. Although carrying both instruments to and from the school on the bus was something of a balancing act. And even though I also had PE on Wednesdays, I knew the track-suited teacher would choose one of his rugger favourites to select the five-a-side teams, and I would be one of the last to be picked. I didn't care. For today, for today was to be the start of my acting career. I had auditioned for the school play, and the cast was to be announced during the after-school drama club that day. For as well as being a violinist like Yehudi Menuhin and a guitarist like Paul McCartney, I had aspirations of becoming a great actor like Roger Moore. The school play this year was to be Tom Sawyer, and I had auditioned for the parts of both Tom and Huckleberry Finn. I would have been happy with either part. I'd already, in fact, begun to learn the lines of both. The drama club started at 3 o'clock and finished at 4 o'clock. So I reckoned that once I'd landed my starring role and modestly accepted the congratulations of my supporting actors, I would have plenty of time to catch the bus home in time to do my paper round and then go to Scouts as usual. First of all, I have to say that you all did very well in your auditions, began Miss Barron, our drama teacher, in a patronising manner. Miss Barron was young and blonde, and by far the most attractive teacher in the whole school. She was like Olivia Newton-John with chalk, and so she always got my complete attention. I was always determined to please Miss Barron. She's really nice, I thought. I like her. Is that blouse see-through? Like the one Olivia Newton-John wears in my look-in poster? I found myself thinking. She's just letting the bad ones down gently, I supposed. That's really nice of her. If she just stood beside the window, I would know if it was see-through or not. Not everyone can play a leading role, but there is always next year, of course, Miss Barron continued authoritatively, interrupting the flow of my meandering thoughts. I looked around me sympathetically at all the kids who were about to be disappointed. Miss Barron was right. They would always have next year. Miss Barron was always right. The part of Tom Sawyer will be played by Thomas O'Hara, were her next words. This was perfect casting. Thomas could use his real name, and he was already a good mate of mine, so we wouldn't have to act too hard at being Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I patted my pal on the back magnanimously as he grinned widely. My part was next. And the part of Huckleberry Finn will be played by Patricia Thompson. Silence. Then applause and congratulations for Patricia bloody Thompson. Excuse me, have I misheard? I didn't get it. I'm not Huck. I didn't get a part. Fuck, I'm not Huck. She has given my part to a girl. I hate Patricia Thompson. I bet her dad plays golf with the teachers and she lives up the Antrim Road. I bet no one from up the Shankill with a Ford Escort respray has ever been given a main part in a play in this snobby old school. I hate that Miss Barron. She gets on like she thinks she's Olivia Newton-John, but she's an old boot, and she gave a boy's part to a girl, and Patricia Thompson already has breasts, and where's she going to put them? I'm telling. Patricia Thompson is going to have to dress up as a boy. Miss Barron is trying to make Patricia Thompson into a homo, except a girl homo, if there is such a thing. And I'm going to tell my RE teacher because it sounds like a sin. Somewhere, amid the midst of my selfish anger and moral outrage, I hastily heard Miss Barron interrupt my internal ravings. The part of Boy 3, one of the boys who paints the fence for Tom, goes to Tony Macaulay. I was to be nothing more than a Boy 3, a bit part at Thomas Sawyer's fence. Thomas O'Hara was to be the star, and I was nothing. This was humiliating. It was like Thomas got to be the new Doctor Who if Tom Baker ever regenerated, while I got to be a stuck inside a rubber suit who then got zapped by the sonic screwdriver. As far as I was concerned, it was over. But once we had been informed, we had to do a read-through of the play. Thomas O'Hara had 30 lines to read for every one of mine. Patricia Thompson put on a deep boy's voice for Huck, but Thomas O'Hara's voice hadn't broken yet, and it didn't sound that the girl playing a boy had a deeper voice than the boy playing a boy. So Miss Barron told Patricia just to speak in her normal voice. It could sound the same. I rolled my eyes at this latest example of artistic misdirection, and I could not hide my disgust at Patricia's attempt at an American accent. The more she tried to sound authentically American, the more she sounded like a farmer from Ballymena. I clearly never watched a single episode of Sesame Street where you learned how to say the alphabet in American. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I just wanted to get out of the papers. At least my talents were appreciated at work, even if they were overlooked at school. As I left school, it was already getting dark. It was raining as usual, so I had to put up my blue duffel coat hood. It wasn't properly waterproof, but it was so thick the rain didn't come through. I walked to my bus stop with my school bag over my shoulder, holding in one hand my guitar in its faux leather case, and in the other hand my violin case. It was just me and my instruments at this bus stop, where you could catch a bus into the city centre, and from the city hall take another bus up the Shankill. Most of the other thespians had gone to the Antrim Road bus stop. Patricia Thompson, for example, just had a short direct bus route home to her detached house, when her daddy didn't collect her in his Rover, that is. It wasn't fair. After more than half an hour standing in the rain, during which time I was distracted by angry thoughts about Miss Barron and what would happen if Patricia Thompson broke her leg, or if her minister were to receive an anonymous letter that didn't allow her to dress up as a boy, I realised that my bus was late. Sometimes the bus was late because of the troubles, but it usually came within an hour once the bomb disposal men had had the chance to blow up the suspect device in the hijacked milk van in which it had been placed. Another half hour passed, during which my mind wandered from time travel to meteorites to Agnetha. Then I realised that the bus was very late indeed. In fact, I knew that by now I would not make it home in time to collect my papers from Owl Mac at the van. At this stage I wasn't too concerned, however. I could still be home within an hour and deliver my tellies a little late. I could blame the provos, everyone would call them bastards, and everything would be okay. I searched in my pockets among the chewing gum and Marley's for a 2p piece I retained for such emergencies, and then I picked up my violin and guitar and calmly walked around the corner to the red public telephone box in order to call home and ask my big brother to collect the papers. It was only once I managed to squeeze inside the phone box with both instruments and my school bag that I discovered it had been vandalised, and I had to awkwardly extricate both myself and my luggage in a reverse movement with my duffel coat hood still up, restricting my rear view. I daren't leave my guitar or violin outside, I was sure, because they would be nicked for Smithfield Market or a bonfire. I walked down the road to the next telephone box, and it had been vandalised too. Then on to the next, and the next. They were all broken. Every telephone receiver had been torn from the wall, and the words "Brits out" scrawled everywhere. I knew these were British Telecom telephones, but I'd never realised that a telephone box could be an instrument of British oppression. Maybe they were bugged, like in James Bond. Maybe if I did get through, 007 would be listening to my every word, in case I was a Russian spy hiding plutonium in my violin case in Belfast. As I considered several possible James Bond plot lines, eventually, about a mile later down the road and halfway to the City Hall, I found an intact telephone box. By this stage, I was very wet and exhausted from walking and manoeuvring in and out of countless telephone boxes, weighed down with my school books and musical burdens. I was starting to panic. If only I had had my own blue police telephone box, my very own TARDIS, I would be able to travel through time and space like the Doctor and be home before I even left for school that morning. Unless, of course, I pressed the wrong button and landed on the planet Skaro and had to battle the Daleks who were trying to take over the universe. I was starting to think I might have to ask my big brother to do my papers that night. I knew that he would charge me double time, which would mean less money to buy Love Is cards for Sharon Burgess. I put my freezing fingers into the cold stainless steel holes of the telephone dial and rang our home number. My mother answered quickly, and I immediately dropped my 2 pence into the money slot, hoping it would work properly this time, because often it didn't. "Are you all right, love?" Mommy asked excitedly. "The buses are all off. The UDA are burning them all to stop a united Ireland, and Pasty says we're going down the Dublin Road. And you and your brother aren't home from your drama and his rugby, and it's terrible. And the roads are all black with barricades, and your daddy can't even get the car down the road to collect you, and you'll have to walk home the night in the dark, and I'm worried sick, and they'll pick on you with your violin, and your father's up to 100. "Mommy, I'm going to be late for my papers," I interrupted, realising that my 2 pence piece would only give me a few precious moments before the pips went and I was cut off. "Can you go round to get my papers from the van, and I'll do them when I get home? Or if I'm not home in time, could you ask beep, beep, beep?" Pips, and then the line went dead. The conversation was over. I hope my mother had got the important message. I wasn't home in the dark, be going anywhere near. But I didn't like the suggestion that I would be picked on for carrying my violin, and I just hoped Mommy would collect my papers and my big brother would deliver them when he got home. So we'll continue with what happened next, but before I do that, I want to say hello to a few other people. Glad you're enjoying it, Joe. Hello, Yitzhak. How are you? Hi, Preston. And Robbie Lee from the YMCA days. Good to have you. Hi, Brendan Mooney and Linda Gould. Hope you're doing okay. And Rose Laverty. How are you? Hi, Sadie. Glad you're listening again. Good to have you along, Stuart. Glad you're enjoying it, Celine. And hello, Marie Hall in Wasaga Beach. Hi, wee Marie. Great to have you along every evening. Hi, Martin. And hello, Alan as well. Great to have you all listening. And I'm going to continue the story from chapter 5 of Paperboy. Chapter 12, I should say. I walked for streets and streets into the city centre, and then for miles and miles up the Shankill, towards home in the dark and the rain, in a duffel coat, with the guitar in one hand, a violin case in the other hand, and a school bag over my shoulder. I must have stood out, but no one picked on me. In fact, no one paid me any attention at all. There were much more interesting sights to behold. Burning buses, barricades blocking the roads, tartan gangs with petrol bombs, police and soldiers in riot gear with guns pointing in every direction. The public transport network was being torched to save Ulster. My concerns were insignificant in relation to these cataclysmic events, but my feet were sore. As I reached the top of the Shankill Road, there was a further delay. Due to several riots on the main road and the adjoining streets, not only were vehicles being prevented from going any further, but so were pedestrians. The RUC had blocked off all the roads and pavements, and so I could go no further. There was only one way up the Shankill to my home, and that was up the Shankill. There was no alternative route. I was stuck. It was 9 o'clock, and I had long since given up any ambition of delivering my own papers that evening, but at least my big brother would have carried out substitution duties fairly adequately. Unless, of course, my mother had done them, but she had sounded much too distressed to be thinking about my papers. I stood quietly among a gathering crowd of similarly stranded pedestrians, waiting for the all clear. I was wet and tired, but mainly bored. Some of the others were talking excitedly about the drama that had unfolded throughout the day. They seemed to be enjoying it all. Then several Elvis fans with tattoos began to move among us, whispering important information in privileged ears. While the gathering crowd speculated about a rumoured IRA invasion and how Paisley would save us, I just stood and dreamed of being Scott Tracy on Thunderbird 2, although not with puppet strings. Suddenly, I was struck across the back of the head and my duffel coat hood fell down. I turned around to see who if I had been picked on by a violin-hating loyalist, but I got a huge shock because standing there behind me in the stranded crowd was my big brother with his school bag and rugby kit. With muck from a scrum still on his face, he exclaimed, "Look at the state of you with a guitar, a violin, and a duffel coat. What do you like, you big fruit?" I was glad to see him too. But then it dawned on me, if he was here and hadn't made it home yet either, then no one would have done my papers. Unless, of course, my parents had done them, and that was unlikely. I began to realise that I was in big trouble. The perfect paperboy had fallen. I imagined the raised voices of 48 angry customers raised against one errant paperboy. I pictured one extremely angry Owl Mac and one deeply disappointed Mrs. Mac. I was doomed. This was the stuff of instant dismissal. It was gross misconduct. My career was at an end. When I explained the situation to my big brother, he wasn't reassuring. "Owl Mac'll kill ye," he said, as the RUC finally led us through the sight of the now quelled street unrest. The two of us arrived home just after 10 o'clock to be greeted by jubilant and relieved parents. My mother opened the front door tearfully and hugged us very tightly. During this embrace, all I could do was look over Mommy's shoulder at the pile of 48 fresh Belfast telegraphs with the white cord uncut around them. They were just sitting there, sullenly undelivered. I felt sick. I dropped an instrument from each hand, knowing that tomorrow I would have to face the music. I slept remarkably well that night, however. The exhaustion of my mammoth trek home outweighed the anxiety provoked by the prospect of facing Owl Mac and the sound of shooting outside. The next day at school, I developed a clever plan. If I wasn't sacked instantly, I would deliver Wednesday's paper and Thursday's paper both together. If anyone asked, I would blame the rioters from down the road, and Owl Mac would never hear about it, and I would survive. Sure enough, when Owl Mac arrived with the Thursday night 6th editions, there was no mention of my misdemeanour. I knew as soon as I saw him that he wasn't angry. His cigarette ash formed a long, drooping protuberance from his mouth. This was not the cigarette of an angry man. I was relieved. Obviously, no one had complained. My customers must have assumed that Owl Mac hadn't been able to get the papers through the barricades the previous night. This had happened before, when the roads had been barricaded to keep us British, and for most people, it was worth the sacrifice. I gathered the Thursday tellies into my paper bag as usual, but then I ran around the corner to our house, where I added the Wednesday night editions into the bag. I thought my shoulder would break under the strain, but this was a minor discomfort compared to the potential trauma of being dismissed at such an early stage in my career. And so I began to deliver 2 newspapers to every house. I tried to fold them into one to take the bad look off them, but together they were too thick to fit through the letterboxes. As I proceeded on my paper round, a series of doors began to open behind me. A third of the way up the street, half the doors were open. It was like when a band marched up the street, except not such a happy occasion. "That's last night, son," said one bemused customer. "What are you playing at?" said another. "Where were you last night, love?" inquired another. It wasn't going well. My plan had backfired. By trying to deliver Wednesday with Thursday, I had revealed to the street that there having been no paper on Wednesday was my fault and was not down to rioters. Mr. Black, of course, dealt the final blow. "That's yesterday's paper," he said viciously. "Did no one ever tell you in your grammar school education that a daily newspaper is worthless the day after it's published?" "Sorry, I was late home last night after school drama, club and riots," I foolishly attempted to explain. "Don't give me that, wee lad," Mr. Black replied scornfully. "You can take yesterday's paper back now. I don't want it, and you can tell Owl Mac I'll not be paying for it, so you can stick it up your arse. This man would have tested the restraint of the most resolute pacifist paperboy. At that moment, a short queue developed in front of me, all of them dissatisfied customers returning Wednesday night tellies, reminding me that they would not be paying for these. I was receiving as many newspapers back as I had delivered. My paper bag was now heavier than ever. This was a disaster. The issue of who would be paying for the undelivered papers immediately brought Al Mac back into the equation, and I knew it was only a matter of time before someone phoned the newsagent shop to complain. I never found out who it was, but I assumed it was old Mr. Black who betrayed me. The next evening, Al Mac arrived in the van as usual. As he stopped, he put the handbrake on more aggressively than usual, it seemed. I could feel the screech in my teeth. This meant trouble. Al Mac scanned the waiting crowd of paperboys until his eyes fixed upon me. He stubbed out a cigarette in the ashtray on the dashboard and jumped out of the van with the vigour of a man half his age. This was a very bad sign. He headed straight for me. I had planned to accept my dismissal with dignity. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't tell my employer where he could stick his paper round. I was clinging on to the hope that he might at least provide me with a satisfactory reference for my next employer. If not, I was destined for signing on Snugville Street forever. You, here, now! Al Mac pointed at me and shouted. He sounded like Davros, the creator of the Daleks. What sort of a wee blurt tries to deliver the Wednesday night telly on a Thursday night? He inquired. I hung my head in shame. It was a reasonable question, except for the wee blurt part. I'm sorry, Mr. Mac. I was at drama, and the buses were off, I attempted to explain, before he unexpectedly interrupted. You were at what? Drama? My employer asked in rhetorical disbelief. I'll have fucking Laurence Olivier doing the papers next. Then, to my surprise, he laughed and shook his head. I feared one of his looser teeth would fall out, but they hung in there as precariously as my contract of employment. Al Mac then looked at me in the eye very seriously and said in a low voice, Last chance, wee lad. Happens again, and you're out on your arse. And you're paying for them. I was relieved. It wasn't to be instant dismissal after all. This was my final verbal warning. It knocked the complacency out of me and reduced my swagger considerably. I delivered my papers with my eyes facing down for the next few weeks until both customers and line manager forgot all. I paid for all 48 newspapers out of my weekly wages, and I donated the batch of Wednesday night editions to the church waste paper scheme to raise money for the Biafran babies. It was a sort of penance. I had learned the hard way, so I had. So that's chapter 12 of Paperboy. Thanks everyone for listening to it. Who else to say? Lamp for Mana, Mike Moran. Hello, Hazel Francie. Hello, Stephen Dexter. Dex, the wonderful director of Paperboy at the Lyric Theatre. Great to have you along, Stephen. And Morgan Shuttleworth, who played my big brother Terry in the 2018 musical of Paperboy. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this chapter of the book. I'll be back same time tomorrow night where I'll be continuing the story. Until then, wherever you are in the world, stay well, stay home, and stay positive. Bye for now.